Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's show. It's going to be the last one for a couple of weeks. We're going to have a little break after this, if I get it finished, that is. We're back on the 23rd. We've got a couple of things that we need to deal with, and so we're going to have a couple of breaks. Hopefully we'll get this done today, or we'll get it up to a stage where you can, if you're following along, you can carry on without having too much drama. So where we're up to at the moment, I better show you, I suppose. So what I did with the box at this stage was I've pulled it apart, I've glued the feet in place on the bottom of it, and I've sanded it all. So it's all been sanded to 1000 grit, so it's basically ready for a finish. That's why it's been disassembled. So what I want to do today is, what we haven't been able to do is finish off the tray, or the internal parts for the top of the tray. We did okay with the drawer. We made the part for that, and this is what it looks like, all nicely cleaned up. So that's the partitioning for the inside of the drawer. So now I need to do the stuff for the top. So this is what we've done so far. So I made the insert to go in the bottom, and then we made the support. We did that last week, and hopefully I was trying to get the tray made last week as well, but something else popped up that I hadn't done that I had to show you, so we didn't get it all done. So we have the support. So now I need to make a tray that will fit in half the side. So it's going to be a half tray so that we can slide it back and forth and you can access it. So that's what we're going to do today. What I've got here is the material that I'm going to use. So I've got the two sides, the two ends, and the base panel. So I'm going to try and get this done in 30 minutes. I'll put the pressure on myself, but we'll try and do it in 30 minutes. It shouldn't be a problem, but if any errors go wrong, I'm going to put it aside and then go on with the second part of the show. The second part of the show is going to be introducing a finish that it's been around for a long time, but I'd never heard of it. Now, maybe that's because I didn't do enough research and I didn't do follow-ups on things that I'd seen. I don't ever remember seeing this stuff, but it's come into focus now, and it's quite a nice finish. I've had a little practice with it, so I'm going to sort of pass on what I know about it anyway. So we'll go into that after the second part of the show. But the first part is going to be building the tray. So let's get started with that. So what I'm going to do is we're going to cut with our H10. Now remember, our H10 template cuts material between 2 and 10 millimeters thick. The material that I have is 7 mil. Now I do all my trays in 7 mil because when I cut the trench for the floor, it's going to be 5 millimeters deep. That leaves me a little bit of material on the outside to support the tray when the whole thing's together. So I'll support the base when I've got the whole thing together. So that's basically the reason I use 7 mil. If you go smaller, you're losing the material that actually helps to support the bottom of the tray. And if you put something heavy in there, there's a chance it's going to snap it out. So the good idea, a little bit thicker. It's a big box, so it can stand the proportions that we're using. And so anyway, that's the way we're going to go with it. So H10, small dovetails. Now I'm only using very thin material, and the way I work that out, what thickness material I get, I'll just flip over to Pammy here so she can have a look. Now remember, we had an error here where we ended up putting in that little inlay. I still want to be able to see the inlay, so what I want the tray to do is sit below the inlay. So I've made the support, it's about 20 mil, or a little bit less than 20 mil, And then my piece of material sits just underneath the inlay. You can see the thickness of the material, or the width of the material. You can just see a little line along the top edge. So that's what's going to happen. Now, of course, these are the ones that go across here, and the short ones we're going to fit in there. Now, it just so happens that this measurement on here is 20 millimeters, which works fine on our jig. So I can cut one complete dovetail, and you can see I've gone from side to side, and sometimes this is the way I test to see if things are going to work for me. I can cut a dovetail in there, and then what I'll do is when I do the other side, you'll see how it works. So let's get on to that and we'll get stuff done. Okay, put that aside. Now our first task, router bits. These are the H10. Now this is just revision because a lot of you have already seen it, you've used them, but if you haven't, this is what we use. These are the H10 router bits. You can see they're very, very small. You don't get them confused with the A10 because the A10 is much, much bigger, but they're very small. You can a small dovetail, and the reason we've got a little dovetail like that is it looks like a hand-cut dovetail. So very, very small. The straight bit is a stumpy little one, and it's only 10 millimeters along the cutting edge. The diameter of it is bigger than the diameter of the H10, the A10. So don't get confused with that one either. If you get confused, you won't be able to see this, but written on the side of the shank of the router bit is the code number and the router bit part next to the Carby Tool logo. If you look at the H or the H10 or whatever those written on the shaft of the router bit, it has to match up with the numbers on the jig. Okay, so you can see here. Can't read it. It's a little bit worn, but it says H10 there next to the GD. So it'll be H10, A10, B10, whatever template you're using. So whatever that is, it needs to match up to what's written on the shank of the router bit. Okay, now our next task, I've got that toothbrush out for a reason. Give it a scrub, and all I'm doing is cleaning out the excess. Now the bearings on them are not sealed bearings, so they will get a bit of sawdust in them, and then we just put a little bit of oil on it. Now it can be this fancy stuff that I get from Japanese tools, or it can just be ordinary sewing machine oil that you might buy from Woolies or Coles or Bunnings or any of the hardware stores that carry it. I prefer this one here. It's quite a nice oil, and that little bottle there is going to last me many, many years. Okay. Let's get on with cutting these dovetails. Now we've got a 30 minute window actually. So always start with my dovetails first. Now I've done many test joints with this setup, and I know that they are correct. So your best bet is to make sure that you do a test joint, but do a test joint with the material that you're using for the job. Don't use something that's not material that's not the same. So you'll find that you get a variation in your, I I had some chalk. I can't find the chalk, so I'm going to use a pencil. What I'm going to do is just cut myself just mark the outsides. The pencil mark will come off quite easily. On this it's hard silver ash. Okay, now the mark that I have here, and this is, I was asked about this the other day. What does the mark symbolise? Now, the mark is just, this is my face side. And it's the way I use this mark is that I call this the outside of the box, right, where the mark is. And where it touches the bottom of the box, I call that my face edge, right? Now, normally you might put that on there, right? And this is your best edge here. So where you do all your squaring, you do it from that edge. The way I see it is this is the bottom of the box, this is the top of the box, and this is the outside of the box. And that's why I use those marks like that. Some people put triangles on there and various other markings on there. I find this one quite easy and adequate for what I need to do with it. So yeah, so you can put whatever mark you like on it. Okay, now adjusting my height. First of all, I've got to decide where I want my dovetails. Here's my box. This is going to be one part. This is going to be the other part. And this is going to be the long one. So what we're going to find here is that the dovetails, if I put them on the short bits, the dovetails will show up there, which you won't see. Right? Now, if you want to be able to see the dovetails, they need to be on the long ones. Okay, so they come out this way. So dovetails on my long bits. So we've established that. Now what I want to do is establish the height. So that's what my box is going to look like, and I'm going to have the dovetails here, so the pins will be on that one there. So when I adjust the height for this, I need the piece that's going to go into the end there. Okay, so this is the opposing piece that's going to fit into there. Like I said, to those of you who have been doing this regularly, this will just be a walk in the park. What I want is, I want ½ millimetre. Now, this piece of material here is the same thickness as my template. So all I'm doing is sitting on there, and the thickness of the material, thickness of the template, and ½ millimetre above the router bit, which will give me a protrusion of joint. And now I'm ready to cut. Shift that out of the way. I don't need the short bits just yet. Now adjusting and setting up. Now, Chris Clark came up with a little technique that I find exceptionally good at, and so I've started using it, and I use it quite often now, particularly when I'm using both ends of the jig. Now, I could sit that in the middle there and just work away and one at a time and all that sort of stuff, but it takes a bit too long. So what we've done is I've drawn, if you can see on my backing board, you can see I've got a line drawn up the middle of, actually that's the wrong part. I went to all that trouble and now I've got to change it. What we're doing is working on a centre line. I've put a centre line on my piece of timber, and I was going to line it up with that, but I've got the line in the wrong place, so I'm going to change that. So I need a ruler and a pencil. need to be in the centre between it, because I want to put the dovetail in the middle of the piece of timber. All right. So if I line that up there, I've got from outside to outside is 13 millimetres. Half of 13 millimetres is 6.5. Actually, it's not, it's 17 millimetres. Sorry, 23 millimetres. Just forgive my ramblings for a second here. Half of 23 is 11.5. My 11.5, little square. Transfer that mark onto the top. I have to do the same on the other end. I was trying to be a little bit preemptive and get this done beforehand so that I didn't have to do this. Okay, now find the centre of my piece of timber. Just make sure I've got that right. Don't want that too dark. Okay, so there's 11, and I only need to do it on one piece. I'll line that up with my line. Bring up my stop. Do the same on the other end. And you can see, just come in on that one there, you can see there's my line. Now if you're doing lots of things, it's all set up, ready to go. I can do both ends without a drama. So everything's locked in. A couple of clamps. Now, part of the reason that this technique works with this is because I have a narrow piece of material and the clamp, as you can see, is much wider than my piece of timber. So if I sat that in there and brought my other stop up, I wouldn't be able to fit my piece of timber or hold my piece of timber in place because the clamp interferes with the stops. So just adjust that a tiny bit. if I work both ends of the jig, at least I have the heel of the clamp holding my piece of timber in place. Same applies here. So there's my second one. And you can see there's quite a bit of overhang. There's quite a bit of overhang for the front of, on the front of the stops, the front of the clamps. Now, if I had the other stop right up close here, that would interfere, so it wouldn't work very well. So ears on everybody, and we'll cut some joints. Just check to see that I have everything turned on. Have my own earmuffs. And so we end up with a perfect dovetail like so. And as you can see, it is quite small, and we only need the one. So what I wanted to do now is, when we rotate this over, you'll notice that I had the face side mark on the outside and I had the bottom of the box against the stop. When we rotate, we do exactly the same. So it moves up to this end. Put our stop in place. Put our clamp on. We'll do the same with this one. And we cut ourselves a joint. Now, we need to change our route a bit. Spanner. Now put the straight bit in. Using our opposing piece of material, we'll do our adjustment again. It's about 1/2 millimetre. You can be pedantic about that measurement if you like. Now we don't need to do anything except turn our jig around. So we've turned it around, so now we're working on the pointy side of our templates. Same technique. Position our piece of timber in. Keep it pushed up against the stop. Do the same on the other end, and you'll notice as well that I've done exactly the same process as I did on the other side, in as much as I have my face side mark on the outside and the bottom of the box is pointing at the stop on both occasions. Okay, so tilt it up like that, just to check to see that I'm hard down on top of the stop, on top of the template, and now I'm going to cut the bits in between. Now I've got a little bit of space there, so I have to cut across the front of it just to begin the cut. So I'll do that first. So ears on everybody. when you cut those ones, you need to be a little bit careful because there's no support at the end of the piece of timber. And so if you go slowly, you'll get yourself a nice dovetail. Okay, so the pin looks quite nice. It's only one pin because we're only cutting one dovetail. Again, rotate exactly the same as you did on the other side. Like so. And then we recut. Okay, I'm finished with that, so I'm just going to take this round a bit out because we need to put a different one in now. The router bit I'm going to use now is I'm going to cut a trench. Using the technique that I talk about all the time. I'll just get rid of this off here. And I'll assemble the jig. Sorry, assemble the tray. So that's the bottom. And so we have a nice little frame. So you can see my joints stick out past each other, which will allow me to give me a little bit of cleanup, but it's basically going to be the little tray. So now what I want to do is I want to cut a trench around the bottom edge. And to make things easy for yourself, before you actually start cutting anything, it's always a good idea to sand the material up to a fairly fine grade. I'm just giving this bearing a bit of a clean, a little bit of oil. The maintenance doesn't take long, just need to stay on top of it. And if you stay on top of it, you're never going to have any problems. So I've cleaned that bearing. I'm going to use it in a sec. I'm not going to use that one straight away. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the little bearing off. And in our kit, we also sell a big bearing. That big bearing is 19mm. And what that does, it reduces my depth of cut down to 1.5mm and gives me a cleaner trench edge. So I've got to look at keeping it as clean as possible so that I don't have a lot of sanding to do on the inside. Now, set my height at 2mm from the table to the bottom of the trench. Now, the reason I only do 2mm is because it's only a small tray and that will give me ample support for the base panel. And I have my base panel here. Just a piece of cedar, matches up to the rest of the box. And all I'm going to do now is rotate around here. So my first concern is safety. Now you saw how easy that went together, and it fits together perfectly. I don't want it to collapse while I'm working on it, so I'm going to use some fibre reinforced tape and just tape the frame together. Now, fibre reinforced means that this tape is not going to stretch, so nothing is going to move. You can use any type of tape you like, but I find this one here, nothing's going to move while I'm doing the cut. And there we have it. Now the other thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to climb route, which means rotating with the rotation of the router bit. Right? And that will give me an even cleaner look. Okay, so here we go. Ears on. Now you can see I have this lovely clean trench now. You can see the edges are nice and clean. It's not very deep. It's not deep enough to actually carry the piece of base that's going to go into it. So now what I need to do is I need to change my bearing to the bigger bearing. The smaller bearing, I should say, not the bigger one. I've already got the big one on there. So just holding something against the tooth there so that I don't cut myself. I can undo the grub screw, take that off, replace that. Make sure you don't move the settings. And now going to use the correct technique and go against the rotation of the router bit for the second cut. Okay, so when you look in there, you can see I have this beautiful clean trench, 5mm deep. It's come up just nice. Now the corners are round. Now the diameter of that's about the same diameter as a 10-cent piece. So what we need to do is we need to cut a piece of material that's the right size, but we also need to round the corners of it. I have a technique for that. So first of all is measure up our material. I want it to be able to move a little bit, so I've got from the bottom of the trench on this side to the inside edge there is 165mm. Now what I don't want to do is I don't want to make it exact fit. I want to make it a little bit smaller. So there's 165, so and 4 is 169. 169, and the other side, when we look across here, is 120. 8 and 4 is 132. So 169 by 132. So I need to cut that to size. Now the piece of material that I've got is 4mm thick, which is the same as the trench or the rebate, or in some cases it's dado. It was a 169. Okay, now just slip over to my drop saw and we'll cut that to length. Might bring these with me and use it over here. Okay, ears on. Now I need this one to be exactly right, so I'm going to square up the edge of it first. It needs to be 132 wide. Just check that. 132. Drop that. So there's my nice piece of timber. All I need to do now is round over the corners. Now I could do that lots of different ways. For those of you who haven't seen this before, I have a square that I can draw around and then I can cut sand and so forth. Or you can use a 10-cent piece, but coins don't appear very much often nowadays, so this is probably a good way of doing it, or to find something that's about the same diameter as your outer bit. Now, I've got a different technique, and that's on my little sander. I have a radius jig, and it's just a matter of doing this. And so now I have all my corners rounded. Now the reason I've got that built is because I do lots of boxes and I do use that technique quite a bit. Now if you want one of these radius jigs, in our channel, in the links on our channel, you get onto Derek.LARK and he will actually make you one. It'll be a plastic one, so if you get onto him, he can just go onto his website. He'll make you a cute little plastic one, any diameter that you want. Right, let's get this together. You'll notice I support the material when I'm disassembling. If you just reef it apart and muscle it apart, you might find that you'll damage the joints. Now we check to see if that fits. Looks like it's going to. And there's my tray. Now all I need to do now is glue that together and make an insert for it. We've run out of time to do that, but that's okay. It's at least you understand how it's going to work, and that will fit in there. It doesn't fit at the moment because my pieces are a bit too long. I want it to fit nice and snug. So once I sand off the corners, that will fit quite nicely. Okay, so as you can see, It's going to go in there beautifully. And that'll be the tray. Okay, so I'll glue that together and I'll put a finish on it and get it all sanded up and go from there. But like I say, it doesn't take very long to actually make a little tray like that. Okay, so yeah, pretty easy to do. Just make sure you've got all the bits and pieces sanded so you've got very little sanding to do afterwards. All right, let's go on to the next bit of the show. That's all we need to do with that. So, putting a finish on things. Finishing is probably one of the I would say probably one of the most confusing things when it comes to making boxes and doing the last part of the box. The thing to remember is that it's the last thing that you're going to do to the box, but it's the first thing that everybody sees when they pick the box up. Because when people pick it up, they go, oh, gee, that's nice. And it's a sense of touch, a sense of feel, and sometimes a sense of smell that attracts people to these lovely finished pieces. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we get that bit right. Now, lots of people talk to me about what finish do you use. They ask me the questions, what finish do you use? All timbers tend to have a different, or finishes have different effect on different finishes. And this is where you need to experiment. Now, experimenting means you might have to spend $1 here or $1 there to get different finishes. And I've been using, I've used probably a dozen different finishes. I've sprayed things. I've polished things with bare wax. I've used Danish oils and lots of different stuff and different manufacturers. And eventually what I've worked out is that anything with the dryers in it, and I knew this from my past history, is that anything with the dryers in it is poisonous. Right? Now, once it dries, obviously the poison is going to be minimal. But you don't want it on things that you use all day, every day. So what we try to do is make sure that we use organic products. Well, I do anyway. Over the years, I've used different stuff to different finishes to complete turning projects and things. But I've chased them all around. I've always, I go onto a website. One finish I never saw was a finish called CONSTANTIA finish. Now, they've been in operation for since about 1977. It's an Australian company in South Australia, and they've come up with some organic finishes. Had I known about them earlier, I probably would have used them earlier. So anyway, I came across them, and so what we're going to do today is I'm going to use some of it and show you how I've used it. I was introduced to it a few weeks ago, so I've had a little bit of an experiment with it. Now, I've got a couple of boxes that I did do with it, and I've got a lid that I did with it. Pammy will just get those out for me. And I used a couple of different techniques to get my finishes. So, and they have different effects, and the different timbers, thank you, the different timbers have a different result. Now, remember, this is one of the boxes that we made in our last series. This is one of the cabinets, and it's come up absolutely stunning. It's just beautiful. It's rose mahogany, hue and pine combo, and you can see everything is just beautiful in it. It's a very nice little cabinet, so set of drawers, and you can see by looking at the finish, you can see there's a sheen about it, a natural sheen about it, and it feels beautiful because I've used a different technique. Now, I may use the same technique on a different material. This one here, just come in close with that. this material here, you can see on the cabinet, if you have a look at the top of the cabinet, you can see the sheen on the cover of the cabinet. It just looks just beautiful. And the whole cabinet looks like that. You can't see it in this light, but that's what the whole cabinet looks like. And it's a natural type of finish. It looks like it's been French polished. It's beautiful. That's rose mahogany. It has a different soak-up capacity than silver ash. And when you look at my silver ash, you can see that the cedar around the frame, this is the experimental frame that we made, lid that we made in the beginning of the show, you can see that there is a bit of a sheen on the cedar, particularly down around here, but there's not so much on the silver ash. So they've both worked differently with exactly the same technique. On the back of this one here, what I did with it on the back side of it was, instead of using the pumice, I'll talk about that in a second, I wet sanded this with the material with 2000 grit, and you can see that the sheen is actually very hard to see. It's just almost impossible. And the same on the cedar. It's almost impossible to see it. So two different techniques have given me two different results. The same technique on two different timbers has given me two different results as well. So as you can see, it can be quite confusing trying to figure out what finish do I use on what finish, on what timber. So I'm going to use the Constantia on this box, and I'll show you how I went about it and what I did with it. Okay, so we won't get it all done, but I'll get some of it done. So let's get me a bit of room here. Now, I always have some sort of platform. I don't want everything covered in finish. I'll just cramp that on there so it's not going to move. Now, it doesn't matter if I get finish all over that. If you have a wooden bench, it doesn't matter if you get the finish all over the bench, and once you give it a clean up, it'll look really nice. So this is the lid. You can see I've got different materials here. I've got red banksia, cedar, and silver ash. On this one here, I've got rose mahogany in the bottom, red banksia, cedar, and silver ash. And in this part here is pretty much all cedar, apart from a little bit of cedar, a little bit of silver ash on the inside of that. So there's a number of different finishes here that we have to fiddle with, or different surfaces that we have to fiddle with. Now here's the products. We have, these are the ones that I was sent. They're just, we have Chinese wood oil, we have red oil, and we have a grain filler, pumice powder. Now the other little one that I've got here is, they also produce a wax. Now it hasn't got a name on it, of course, but it's the wax that the company's those there. Now I've spoken to the people at Constantia, and they've said, and I'm going to put this up here just so that you can see what we have. Oh, that's right, we're on the wrong camera, aren't we, Pam?
And you need to tidy up.
Oh, yeah, I need to tidy up as well. Shift that out of the way. Okay, now here's some information about them, and I've put it up on here so that if you want to go back and have a look later, everything's there for you. There is a link to Constantia below. The woman's name that you will talk to if you ring that number is Summer, and she's a lovely lady, and she gives you lots of information. Now, if you use a code word Coles Special and you purchase some of this material, you'll get a 5% discount. Okay, so just a little bit of incentive for you. Any orders over $50 will also receive a free sample of a free sample pot, and it's probably about something that size, of another one of their products. So have a think about it, get on their website, have a look, and like I say, you can by using Coles Special, you'll get a 5% discount. So anyway, that's something for you to think about. Let's get on to using the product, because I've only got 10 minutes left. Now my first step, I'm going to work on the lid. The rest of it will get done later. What you'll probably need to do, you'll find that on the project, they on the website, CONSTANTIA website, they have little pads like these. Okay, so these are just little rubbing pads, and they're the ones that I've been using. You can see this one's worn a bit, so you need fairly sturdy material. And all I've done is just wrapped up some cotton waste underneath, and I've just got a cable tie there just holding it together. So that's all you need to do, and that's going to give me a nice little pad to put this stuff on. So my first bit, need a brush. I'm just going to use the Chinese wood oil. I'm not going to use the red oil at this stage, so I'll put that one aside. Now there's two ways to do this. Number one, you can mix yourself up a little paste. You can see I've got a paste there. Now that paste, and there, as for the amount of material that you put in there, I've just got some Chinese red oil and pumice powder. Now pumice powder is really, really fine. This is the technique that's used by French polishers. Right? You can, if you have a look at that, you can see that that is almost like flour. Okay, so it's very, very fine. So it's just a bit of that in with the oil. And as for the amount that you put in there, I think you have to do a bit of experimenting. Mix it all together. This is one technique. And spread it on. So I put a reasonable amount on. Now what this is going to do, it's going to create a slurry, and it's the technique that most people use for grain filling. So my little pad has actually got a little bit of the oil in it, and I'm just going to work it. Now this will overcome some of the problems that arise when you have the grain raised because you've got it wet. So what it's going to do is going to take off, because it's pumice. It's actually scouring the surface and creating a slurry. It'll fill it. I'll give it another one. You can see it's changed already. So I'm only doing the panel at the moment. Okay, run along the grain. Takes a little bit of elbow grease for that technique. All right, so that's the physical way of doing it. And you can see it's very flat. It looks flat. It doesn't look like it's got a sheen at all. But when you feel it, it's like silky soft. Now, there are other techniques that you can use. I'm just going to show you these little you can see these are a Rupees product. Now I buy these from Sydney Tools, and these are what they are. This one here is a coarse wool polishing pad. It's like a little piece of carpet. This one here is just a little medium lamb's wool pad, and this one here is just a sponge application pad. And then I've got a larger version of the pad. Now I use those on my MIRKA equipment. So they're just Velcro pads. They stick on there and I can use them to polish, right? So I've got the big one and I've got a small one. Now if you can't afford these tools, and if you want to chase these up, Japanese tools sell these, you can go to Jimmy Carroll. Sounds like I'm doing a bit of advertising here. You can go to Jimmy Carroll and you can buy drill sanding pads. And this is what they look like, right? They work quite well as well. So you can just pop that onto there. Actually, I might use the bigger one. You can pop that onto there. And then you can just put it in your drill. And have a polishing pad. Just shift that stuff out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. So now you can put it in any size drill you like. This is only a small drill, it's a very slow thing, so I would use that if I was using my application pad. I'd put my application pad on. Put some finish on, and then with the sponge pad, takes away a little bit of the effort that you might need. Does a little bit slower. If I want to speed that up, I can take it off that and put it onto my MIRKA. And get a similar sort of result. You can see the finish is starting to sort of blossom a little bit now. It's starting to come up quite nicely. Any marks that I've created, it doesn't create any sort of swirls or anything like that because I'm not pressing that hard. So it's just a matter of adding the finish on wherever you need it. Now remember, this has got pumice in it, a little bit of pumice powder, and that pumice powder is actually creating a bit of a slurry and filling the grain. Now you may need to do this 2 or 3 times, depending on the type of material. Some materials will soak up a lot quicker than others, and you need to let them settle. Now, I've basically got one coat done already, and when I look at that, I think that probably, just wipe my excess off, you can see that the finish is starting to come up beautifully. It's starting to create a sheen. Yeah. We're not yet at a stage where we're burnishing because we've still got a wet surface, and we've also still only created it's basically sanded all of the high spots off the grain. And when you feel it, it's actually quite smooth. So you can see it's starting to get there, right? And the finish on it is just stunning. And the thing that it hasn't done, it hasn't stained any of the white material that's on there, and it hasn't changed the colour of the red Banksia. So it's just a matter of working through that. Now, once I've done that, then I use a little bit of finish, and I just do a bare finish over the top. Okay, so there's no slurry or anything like that. There's no pumice in this, just the finish. And give it an hour before you actually do this. I'm doing it because it's on the show. And what I will do is I'll let that settle and sit for about an hour. So I'll just give it all a nice wipe over like that. Now, finishing takes the time. You need to take the time with finishing. So spend the time getting that nice, and people start looking at the quality of your handiwork, the quality of your craftsmanship, the quality of your design, those sorts of things. People will start looking at that rather than picking on things that you haven't done on the finishing. So make sure your finishing is perfect. Use these little pads. You can see I've got lots of different tools here that I use, and I experiment with all sorts of different things when I'm doing it. So my advice to you is experiment. Have a little play with different things, different finishes. I'm assured that these are organic finishes. The red oil, this one here is Chinese wood oil. The reason the word Chinese on there is because Chinese refers to make finishes out of natural vegetable products, and I'm assured that that's what they're made of, and they're quite safe for all sorts of stuff. So have a little look on their website, and
Graham wants to know where you got the brush, what the brush is.
oh, the brush. Oh, the brush is just a cheap Bunnings throwaway brush. I used them by the 100, but yeah, get them from Bunnings or a hardware store anywhere, and you don't need to spend a lot of money on the brushes. The thing about it is, this stuff here is not going to dry out your brush either, by the way. So it's got quite a shelf life in it. And so they will last a little bit longer. The products, you'll need to look at the products online to see what you use to thin down their bits and pieces. They have about 4 or 5 different products. I've only been sent these ones. So there's another one that's called Seed Lac, which is a product that they use predominantly for French polishing. But the technique that I've just used now is pretty much the same as French polishing. It just needs a little bit of elbow grease and work with it, and you'll find that you'll get yourself some really, really nice results. And let things settle. Give it an hour, give it 2 hours. It takes 24 hours for it to settle enough to be able to call it dry. So
Will you then wax the...
Yeah, and then after that, I'll put a coat of wax on. I'm not going to do that to this one because if I put too much of a build-up on it, it's going to be difficult to actually get the thing to work properly. So the more you put on, the shinier it'll get. Okay, so, but you need to leave it an hour or 2 or even 3, depending on the temperatures between coats. If you want to use the pumice powder in between coats, by all means do that. Make yourself up a little paste and something that you can use often. That'll probably sit there for, well, I've got the whole of the box to do that, so I'll use up all of that later down the track. But as you can see, just beautiful, just really, really clean, smooth, and it just looks really, really nice. And you can see that in this product, in this box.
And it doesn't go tacky, Cole?
No, it doesn't go tacky. It's just beautiful and smooth, and yeah, it's what one would expect if you picked up a quality piece of furniture. You would expect a finish like this on it, and you can see that is just, it doesn't even have finger marks. You know, like, that's the thing about it. No finger marks. I haven't put a cup on it, but I'm not going to do that. But you can see even on the front of it, it's just come up so nice. I wished I'd seen it later, earlier, because I would have been using this many, many years ago if I had known about it. Maybe I need to sort of revamp my research techniques. But yeah, it's a natural product. It's made in Australia. So yeah, look it up and have a go at it. So that'll be it for today. I hope you got something out of this. I haven't finished the box, but when we come back in a couple of weeks, I'll show you the box. Now, as I was saying, we are going to have a break because that's the last we're going to do with this box. The next time you see the box, it will be assembled and all finished. I hope you learned something with the box, because we didn't work with a plan. We just did everything as on the fly, as you might say, and we've come up with something that looks reasonable. At least it will when we've got the whole thing together. So it's a matter of putting the whole lot together. Now, like I said, we are going to have a break for the next couple of weeks. I'm going to come back with a new project. Well, I see it's some new techniques. Well, not new techniques, but some old techniques brought forward. You'll see. Anyway, that will start on the 23rd. So we're going to have the next 2 weeks off. I've got to do a bit of maintenance around the workshop here, and we need to go away for a little bit, and then we'll go on for that. So have a nice break, everybody, and we'll have a break as well. Skip, I see you've popped on. Skip, I hope you weren't too late, because we had daylight saving start today, so it was an hour earlier than normal. So maybe you and John could set your clocks an hour earlier. Anyhow, have a good break, everybody, and I will see you all in 2 weeks' time. Now, don't forget, you get a discount if you buy that stuff online. Coles special. Have a good one, everybody.